The California Legislature is in its final recess for the 2024 session. We'll see them back again in August, but not before a couple more anti-2A bills went the way of the dodo. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. That is right, we have fought back a couple more anti-2A bills just before the legislature went on its final recess for the 2024 session. To talk us through it today, we have brought back the legislative director of CRPA. He is also the host of Firing Line Radio. You can catch him on Saturdays at 1 p.m. on AM 590 The Answer. That is Rick Travis. Rick, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so I guess, Rick, we can just jump right into this. The legislature is on recess, which I'm sure is why we're sporting the Hawaiian shirt today, sporting it fashionably. But we did get a couple bills taken off the plate right before they did that. That's AB 667 as well as AB 3014. These were GVRO bills. Can you go ahead and explain to me what these bills were? And I'm also kind of curious, I mean, is this something that you were expecting? And when the legislature reconvenes, do you expect them to have some more vigor when they come back, or do you expect this trend to continue?
So on the two bills, they're GVROs, which is our slang or initials for gun violence restraining orders, better known in common parlance as red flag laws. And California has some of the most strict red flag laws in the nation, as you know, Kevin. And so they consistently are trying to get the street creds that they're involved with red flag laws because that's something that the far left loves. And so what they keep trying to do is expand who can report you. And this is just basically more of a move towards what you see in other communist and socialist countries like China, turning more and more of your neighbors, your coworkers, people that you see in everyday life into informants for the state. And a lot of this is done under the guise of, domestic violence and trying to keep people safe. And look, everybody here at CRPA, myself included, I spent a career of helping to protect women and children from domestic violence. I have seen some horrific scenes personally when I was a paramedic. So look, for those people, yes, but this has also been weaponized in many ways. And that was something that we pointed out in testimony over and over, along with some of our other allies. And there were a lot of things that came together, but these became too heavy a lift at too difficult of a year. And so they died. And I expect to see a few more like that happen.
So when the legislature comes back, what are your expectations? I'm just sort of curious, and just like last year, we've seen a lot of these bills go into the suspense file. Are we looking at a repeat of last year? Can you go ahead and remind us what the suspense file was and what that process is?
Sure, I'll talk about the suspense file, and then I'll talk about the budget, and then I'll talk about some of the factors. But the overarching question that you asked is, what are we expecting when we come back on August 5th? And when we come back on August 5th, it is going to be fast. It's going to be furious. There's a lot of moving items that I'll try to put really quickly and lay it out so people know what to expect. So one thing you can expect is all the bills that came out of the assembly, so those would be the AB bills that we normally talk about, those are all in Senate appropriations and are parked in what is known as the suspense file. Likewise, all the Senate bills are in the Assembly in their Appropriations Committee, and they're in the suspense file, which always begs the question, what's the suspense file? Suspense file was something that was started in the 1980s by our legislature, and what it was a file where you could bring bills in to see what their impact was going to be on the budget. And the reason for that is, Kevin, as you just know, we just got done going through this last-minute budget process with the governor and the legislature, which says this is how much money there is in the system. Incredible cuts. California is, depending on who you talk to, between 62 and 120 billion dollars in debt. Some are saying that's 120 billion over the next 2 years, which would be 60 billion a year, which is the starting point. So that means, like, when the budget comes out, it's like, oh, honey, we're really in debt. And we got to figure out how we're going to pay for things. So there's been a lot of going after funds in different areas. Of course, places where people were smart and screamed and yelled and said, don't do that. Those are areas that we were able to get a lot of bills stopped. So we have numerous bills that have been watered down. We could take one of the early bills that was part of the big five that we were going after, and that bill itself has been watered down to now requiring an FFC for someone who decides to move to California with firearms, that they have 120 days to go get an FFC. Like, it's almost non-existent as a bill. Um, but we're still pushing on that. Like, where's the money come from to notify people? And how are you going to know when someone's moved here for 120 days? So that's where this suspense file may come into play. And we're looking at a lot of those bills may finally get knocked out.
Well, speaking about the suspense file, is it directly correlated to the budget? I mean, is that what's most heavily weighed on that? So if that's the case, are you saying that it's likely a lot of these bills won't even make it through?
It could be. I mean, what we've seen in the past, we have new leadership. So that's why I'm a little reticent to say, like, if this was a year ago, I could have said, well, this is what Portantino's going to do in Senate Appropriations because he ran it. And what has happened over the past 3-4 years with the previous leadership of those two committees was they would wait and they would stack them all up, usually until the end of the second week. And then we would run through in 2 days 2,000 bills, which means no one's testifying, no one's doing anything. And there's all sorts of creative rules that they can use a rule. You've been there with me, Kevin, and they say, okay, the following 11 bills per this rule automatically voted on. And no one even on the dais is voting. It just goes through. So there's some games that can be played. But those are also arguments that we're already crafting veto letters for anything that does get across and saying it should be vetoed because of this cost, that cost, et cetera. So there'll be a lot of testimony going on starting the 5th all the way till the end of the second week. And at that point, we're cut off from testimony. And then it's up until the last day of August that they have till midnight to pass things. But I think we're going to look at a lot of these things being stopped.
So you talk about a lot of inside influences there. Let's talk about some potential external influences. Rick, I'm curious to get your take on this. We've been talking for a while about Gavin Newsom sort of posturing for national politics. With the debate between Biden and Trump, we've seen Biden's poll numbers continue to go down. People within the Democratic Party, as well as the mainstream media, talking a lot about asking him to step aside. Whether he does or not is kind of inconsequential. The fact is, though, is that media is turning its attention to potential people that could replace him. Gavin Newsom being one of those. We've seen a lot of negative press come out on Gavin Newsom, the way that he's run California. Does this at all affect the legislature and potentially Newsom signing bills that get sent to him at the end of the year?
Yeah, leading up, that's a great question. Leading up to the July 3rd recess date, we saw a lot of movement in the Capitol, a lot of focus. We were able to use that to our advantage. And so the bills that we mentioned earlier were a part of a series of bills that just didn't make it out of committees because the members of those committees were tied up in last minute negotiations with the governor for a series of moves that were designed to weaken Proposition 47, which has been brought forward by district attorneys, been led famously by former Assembly member, now Congressman Kevin Kiley, to repeal and reset back so we start to get some law and order in this state. Of course, there's been a lot of the left that has said that that is completely motivated by racial and socioeconomic issues. And so the governor really got in there and started calling everybody together to meetings. The leadership got together from everything we were being told by staffers and everyone else. He had the votes to pass what he wanted to pass. And at the 11th hour, he made an audible call and said, just kidding, not doing it. That did several things all at once in California. Number one, it cleared the path greatly for Prop 47 to move forward. Not that it wouldn't have been forward, but now there's less opposition to it in terms of competing legislation. Second thing it did was it really ticked off a lot of Dems inside of our own state capital because they had expended a lot of capital, including some Dems that are in some very tight races that are flippable, which could work very well for our side because they leaned way, way left to go with the governor, and then the governor bailed and left them holding the bag, so to speak. So there's some animosity, and some of that animosity may or may not play out. It's always hard to tell when we come back on the 5th of August. But there is a rush by this governor, and it's twofold, Kevin. One, none of us have a crystal ball. There's a lot of pundits, a lot of people prognosticating on what is going to happen when it comes to the presidential, but its impact on Californians, on the Second Amendment, and more importantly, on our members and those we represent is basically this. One, the more time the governor spends outside of the state trying to run for office, whether that be securing a position on the cabinet, which a lot of people think that's what he's trying to do with Biden, whether it's actually making a move at the Democrat convention, we have to see. But because he now has literally a foot and a half of his body outside of California, that means his power base here in California weakens all the time. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And of course, now a lot of people are starting to look at the lieutenant governor and saying, hey, in either case, Biden goes forward, Biden wins, which is one of the possibilities. Does that mean that we lose our governor to his cabinet? Newsom makes a move along with Governor Whitmer, who's the other one that they've talked about at the DNC. What does that look like? I mean, these are all strapped in a lot of politics, which causes a lot of politicians in California, some to want to cozy up and some not to want to cozy up with the governor because they don't want to get tainted.
Well, the terrain as far as, I guess, Second Amendment legislation in California certainly looks favorable for those advocating against the anti-2A bills. What are your final thoughts moving forward? We got a month of recess with the legislature, and then we're gonna hit the ground running. What are your thoughts till the end of the year?
My thoughts are twofold, really. One is we have to keep fighting. Two, we have to start coming up with legislation that is going to start moving things back in the correct direction. And that's on us to get that done. But it's also on each person listening to this, is that, as I stated several times in this video, there are several seats now that are up for play. There are several seats that we're talking right now where we sit could be decided by as few as 50 to 100 votes. And when I say several, I'm talking more than a half a dozen. Those half dozen seats could make a demonstrative change on how we do business in California. So for those that don't vote, for those that don't register, for those that don't encourage family to vote, shame on you, because we need you out there. And for those of you who are doing the right job and the right thing, I can't sing your praises high enough and loud enough, because you're in this fight and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the insight. Really appreciate the time, Rick. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Always.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like content like this, you like being updated on Second Amendment litigation and legislation, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way to be informed. It's also the best way to directly contribute to the fight. So once again, hit that little notification bell so that you get notified as these videos come out. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.